Hey y'all, this is Brown at Brown, and tonight we have another 2-for-1 deal going, or I should say another 2-for-1 review. Namely, we have a story from Marvel Comics Presents starring Wolverine called Hauntings. And then we have a whole issue of Marvel Comics Presents, namely issue 100. So, back to back here, we got the main cover with Wolverine on it, which in turn leads into issue number 100 of Marvel Comics Presents. And by the way, real quick here, you got this really cool looking Sam Kieth cover, which is an homage to an illustration by John Byrne that he did of Wolverine back in a classic X-Men story, the Dark Phoenix saga. And it even acknowledges it right there. And here we go. We have another really good Sam Kieth cover for issue number 100 of Marvel Comics Presents. And we got Wolverine crushing Ghost Rider with the number 100 in concrete. And then flip it over. Ghost Rider's crushing Wolverine with the same number. But this was actually kind of a return to the original format, or in terms of, say, it being not being a flip book. It's just, in this case, it's like one whole story but broken up into 4 chapters, and all 4 chapters in this case were actually illustrated by Sam Kieth, who was mainly known for doing some of the cover art for the series at this point, but he'd also done the artwork for the Wolverine story Blood Hungry, which was actually a pretty nifty little tale. If you get a chance, definitely check it out. Has a really good story that introduces the readers to the villain of Cyber, who became a thorn in the side for Wolverine for quite some time. But the 2 stories here, I have to admit, I appreciate how one story, the story in issue 99, the Wolverine story Hauntings, kind of leads into issue 100, and that there is a connection there. And also I like the fact that the main villain of the story, or the stories I should say, Nightmare, actually has a connection to Ghost Rider, or at the very least he's had some interactions with the Danny Ketch version of Ghost Rider. But the initial story that sets things up, you got Wolverine, who's being besieged by Nightmare, who is basically kind of this dream dimension overlord almost. I mean, I'm not going to say he's a demon, but he is a malevolent entity. I mean, he's called Nightmare for a reason, and his realm is within the his realm is of nightmares. And so basically he's an evil that arguably serves a purpose, though, because much like how dreams are the mind's way of emptying its garbage, nightmares are, I guess, the way of bringing out negativity that we keep locked down, and usually we don't express in the day-to-day world when we're awake. So Nightmare as a character does have a purpose, but granted, though, he feeds off of the negative energy and the fear that that humanity is subjected to, both on a conscious level and subconscious level. And he usually deals with characters such as Doctor Strange in terms of being a part of a rogues gallery. But he has had some interactions with Ghost Rider here and there. I mean, back in the original series, he had a supporting role in this one particular story that, even though he only appeared like once or twice, he had a very important role in the sense that he's the one who actually clued Johnny Blaze and Zarathos into who Zarathos really was. And so then, fast forward to the 90s, where, Danny Ketch was the new Ghost Rider. There was issue 11 in which, Howard Mackie and Larry Stroman crafted a really good story where Nightmare is, trying to persuade Ghost Rider to come over to his side, because he's thinking that this Ghost Rider is merely Zarathos, albeit with yet another case of amnesia and a different host. But Ghost Rider ends up telling him that basically, hey, you got the wrong guy, buddy, and I don't appreciate being manipulated. And so basically he makes an enemy of this new Ghost Rider. So there is a history between Nightmare and Ghost Rider, even though this is there are two different Ghost Riders that he's had a history with. So I actually appreciated that. But okay, so going back to how things start off here, Nightmare in the story Hauntings is basically out for a stroll in his realm, and he's talking to his steed, saying, who shall we visit tonight? And so lo and behold, he comes across Wolverine, who's having one of his dreams, and basically Nightmare just starts to attack him, like physically. Kind of like Freddy Krueger. I mean, he grows claws, because, Wolverine, he pops his claws in this Nightmare, and Nightmare, in turn, grows claws of his own, and basically starts shish-kebabbing Wolverine to the point where he's bleeding like crazy. And then, he starts to attack him on a sort of psychological level, in the sense that he starts appearing as, a couple of people that Wolverine was close to, like Mariko, who Wolverine was in a relationship with, but sadly had to kill, because she was suffering from an agonizing case of poisoning. And so Wolverine, basically had to put her out of her misery in another story, and it's something that's always haunted him. So when he's confronted by Mariko in this dream, and he goes from being shish-kebabbed by Nightmare to being confronted by, the love of his life, whom he had to put down or put out of her misery. I mean, he's, distraught and, basically breaking down. But then, of course, this turns out to be a trick by Nightmare, and Nightmare basically just goes from embracing him while disguised as Mariko to basically just impaling Wolverine with the claws that he grows, and lifts him up, to where Wolverine's just spilling blood out. And it's actually a pretty gruesome panel. I mean, for a code approved book, that is. I mean, I've seen worse, but at the same time, it's kind of like, dang. But if that's not bad enough, Nightmare appears to Wolverine as Professor X, and basically, starts, taunting him, saying, how he's a ticking time bomb, and he's inevitably going to give in to his feral nature and kill Professor X. And then he starts to, sort of imply that he's already done that. And Wolverine, he just basically snaps and, charges at Nightmare, and that's when he wakes up. And so, it's kind of a combination of, raw anger and raw terror at what he is very much at risk of doing that propels him to wake up. And so, he's, trying to, calm down and everything, and Nightmare, sort of watching from the, metaphorical sidelines, from his realm, is saying that, oh, we will meet again, because this was fun, basically. And so that leads into the, the 100th issue of Marvel Comics Presents, in which it's actually one story, albeit broken down into 4 chapters, but all illustrated by Sam Kieth. And so, real quick though, a little thing about the Hauntings story was that the plot was done by Rob Liefeld, of all people, and the script was by Howard Mackie, who at this point in time was the regular writer on the Ghost Rider series, and also he had been the writer for the Ghost Rider stories, with the exception of the 2 parts story that was done by Dan Slott. over in Marvel Comics Presents. And so so you have the script by Howard Mackie, working with a plot by Rob Liefeld, but Rob Liefeld didn't do the artwork. The artwork was by Jim Valentino, who, as far as Marvel goes, was arguably best known for doing several What If stories, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy. And so so it's very interesting going from that particular art style, which is sort of Jim Valentino trying to imitate Rob Liefeld to varying success, and then you go from that to this story, which is entirely done by Howard Mackie, both in terms of plot and script. And then you have the surreal, very abstract art of Sam Kieth. And so what ends up happening here, though, is that coming from Hauntings, you have both Ghost Rider and Wolverine being recruited by Doctor Doom, of all people, because it turns out that Doctor Doom has also been attacked by Nightmare, and basically he's trying to come up with a way to prevent this from happening, because Doctor Doom, for those of you who don't know, is arguably the best known villain of the Fantastic Four, but he's a dictator of the nation of Latveria, and he's a cybernetics genius and sorcerer all rolled into one. But he's someone who it depends on who's doing the writing, but he can be a well-intentioned extremist or a dictator, or a benevolent dictator, but he could also be just a straight up evil dictator, sort of along the lines of Stalin or something like that. And in this particular story, it's more along the lines of evil dictator. But basically, he can't brook any sort of weakness, on his own, from himself. I mean, because he sees there's a mental gap that's being exploited by Nightmare, by this other dimensional entity. And Doom, basically, since he's the master of all he surveys within his realm, as in Latveria, he can't abide the fact that someone is basically just pulling his strings and having fun with his subconscious terrors. And so through a rather complicated means of, say, both science and magic, he is able to get Ghost Rider and Wolverine, two people who had recently had a brush with Nightmare, but who also have a rather strong willpower, and in both their cases, he recruits them to fight Nightmare, to destroy him. And so at first, both Ghost Rider and Wolverine, as well as Danny Ketch, Ghost Rider's human host, are very reluctant to team up with Doom, because they know that Doctor Doom's a bad guy, and it's not like it makes sense to team up with a bad guy. And so basically Doom initially appears to both Danny Ketch / Ghost Rider and Wolverine in some tailor-made nightmares that he's able to sort of manipulate through using the means of his scientists, as well as a monk that was from the order of monks that basically helped Doom to become who he was, as far as giving him a place to create his armor and everything and what have you. And so this is kind of a connection to ancient history here. But so you have this monk from that order working with these scientists to basically help Doom to communicate with Ghost Rider and Wolverine to get them both to fight Nightmare. And so initially both of them reluctantly agree to help Doom, because they've dealt with Nightmare before, recently. And so And at first, Nightmare's kind of amused by all this because he's thinking, hey, three victims in one place, three playmates, But then it turns out that that Wolverine and Ghost Rider, not to mention Doom, actually start doing damage to Nightmare in his realm. And so Nightmare realizes that, Doom's got something up his sleeve, because usually this does not happen. Like, the people that he's tormenting can't fight back usually. They can't actually hurt him. And so, Wolverine at this point is wanting to, have words with Doom. I mean, he's wanting to basically take Doom down because, on one hand, he knows that Nightmare is a malevolent entity that attacks, basically all of humanity on a regular basis in their sleep. But he also knows that Doom is someone who always has something up his sleeve. And Nightmare was letting slip that, Doom was basically behind his most recent, I guess you could say, quarrel with Nightmare. And so, Wolverine's wanting to know what that means. And so basically, Ghost Rider, who at this point had been persuaded by Doom, to, help him out, tries to stop Wolverine and say, no, I mean, we have to work together, basically. And so Wolverine's not having it, and he remembers what happened last time he tried to stab Ghost Rider back in the real world, in which case, there was an interaction between Ghost Rider's Hellfire and Wolverine's Adamantium, which basically knocked them both out. But Wolverine's thinking that because this is a dream, this, it'll be different. But there is a harsh reaction once more, or interaction once more, between, the Hellfire of Ghost Rider and the Adamantium of Wolverine. And so basically this freaks both Doom and Nightmare out, because Doom figured that something was going to happen, but he didn't know what it would be like within the realm of dreams or nightmares. And this harsh interaction, between the two, ends up basically causing a ripple effect throughout Nightmare's realm, and Nightmare starts freaking out, saying that his whole realm's coming undone. Plus, with Doctor Doom manipulating things from behind the scenes, with his combination of technology and sorcery, with his people, and plus, Doom himself within the dream is able to manipulate things as well. And so, Nightmare starts freaking out, saying that, if they kill him, basically, all of humanity, will be insane within a week, because, he played, as evil as he is, he's important, for, the minds of humanity to basically process any sort of, subconscious, fear and terror, that they feel, in their sleep and what have you. And he's able to, help them to, come to terms with certain things. But if Doom has his way and conquers Nightmare in his own realm, then all of humanity is going to be screwed. And so Nightmare uses his abilities to kind of cut an opening in the veil in between realities, where he's showing them that Wolverine and Ghost Rider have actually been kidnapped by Doom. And apparently at some point, before Doom appeared to them in their dreams and recruited them, he had actually had several of his Doom bots abduct both Danny Ketch, / Ghost Rider, and Wolverine, and had them, incapacitated to where, they were basically plugged into this, weird apparatus, where, they could basically be in sync with Doom, who also is plugged into his apparatus as well, to where, Doom was able to appear to them in their dreams and recruit them to take on Nightmare. And so, basically, once they see that they've been screwed over by Doom, this kind of, helps them to actually wake up. Excuse me. And once they wake up, they're not happy, and so they start, taking apart Doom's, robot henchmen, and they're able to make it out of, Doom's castle, and so this in turn results in Doom waking up and, basically being really pissed off and ready to, vent his anger and frustration on, the monk who was supposed to be overseeing all this, the process behind the scenes, the combination of, technology and magic, that was going to help Doom conquer Nightmare, because he knows that, one, he's failed in doing so, and two, he's made enemies of both Ghost Rider and Wolverine. And so as he's about to vent his frustration on the monk, it turns out that the monk has actually died of fright, because Nightmare, once he figured out what was going on, basically caused some sort of feedback, which basically destroyed the monk's mind and, gave him a heart attack. And so, Doom's basically, having to content with himself with the notion that, this, individual who failed him, has met with an appropriate penalty. And so, as he, as things end with Doom, Nightmare, on the last page is, basically saying that, he now has, plans for all three of them, Doom, Ghost Rider, and Wolverine. And so basically kind of a stay tuned, type of thing ending. And so this was, these two stories, they weren't anything like, I guess you could say, spectacular, but they were intriguing in the sense that you had, both the art of Jim Valentino and the art of Sam Kieth, being able to get away with being very abstract in a sense that it dealt with dreams for the most part. I mean, Sam Kieth's artwork has always been abstract, but Jim Valentino is usually more concrete. And so it was interesting seeing both artists, get to depict, a landscape of, dreams and nightmares. So, I mean, on the other hand, though, as far as, say, Jim Valentino's art, I feel like, he was trying too hard to emulate Rob Liefeld's style, because the two of them were contemporaries at this point in time. And I'm wondering if, say, the fact that Rob Liefeld had plotted the story, I wonder if maybe he had done some rough artwork and Jim Valentino was basically kind of, going over it or something like that. But, so yeah, I mean, at times, the artwork in the Wolverine story is actually pretty good, and other times it's like, Valentino's trying too hard to imitate Liefeld. But on the other hand, with the Sam Kieth's story, the artwork, most of the artwork in there is actually pretty good, but as the story, gets to like its, climax, it gets very rushed and, not as, I guess you could say, articulate yet surreal that, in the way that Sam Kieth usually does his art. Like it feels like, oh crap, we're running out of, space to, complete this story. And so they basically try to, throw some stuff together, or Sam Kieth tries to throw some stuff together, visually speaking, and it goes from being, very, visually spectacular to being just very rushed. And so, and that's another thing, unfortunately, because Howard Mackie, I mean, for the most part, I mean, he does a pretty good job in writing the story, in the sense that, you have, characters that, he's, familiar with, or he's written before. He's written both, Ghost Rider and Wolverine, and of course, Nightmare at this point. But I don't know if he'd ever written Doctor Doom before, and he actually did a pretty good job with Doom. And he went for the more evil dictator, version of Doctor Doom than, say, the benevolent dictator. And so it's this kind of a mustache twirling, evil type thing. But I like the fact that, he was given characters that he was familiar with to write. And so, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and Nightmare, are all consistent with, how he's, written them before. And it was really cool seeing his take on Doctor Doom. And I never really thought I would see all three of these characters, in one story together, and let alone, one in which they're all trying to take on Nightmare. And the fact that Doctor Doom was manipulating both Ghost Rider and Wolverine to, take out Nightmare, I mean, doesn't really come as a surprise, considering that Doctor Doom, as I mentioned earlier, is someone who always has something up his sleeve. But at the same time, I mean, the fact that he was literally trying to destroy Nightmare because, he can't abide there being any sort of weakness on his own part, and he doesn't want anyone exploiting, even if it's just his subconscious. And so, just the whole idea that, Doom's ego, was so inflated that he thought he could, basically, enslave Nightmare to his will. I mean, it's kind of like, damn. I mean, I know Doctor Doom's powerful, but, and then again, though, he almost pulled it off, albeit with, the unwilling help of, Wolverine and Ghost Rider as pawns. And so Nightmare himself was even freaked out at one point, which I thought was a nice touch by Howard Mackie, in the sense that, Nightmare, nearly got defeated, and he's having to explain to him, it's like, guys, yes, I'm a bad guy, but I actually serve a purpose. You do this, you're screwing yourselves over. Dr. Doom, on the other hand, he's the one you actually need to, talk to, that kind of thing. So I liked seeing that, and I thought Howard Mackie did a good job of, taking Nightmare down a peg in a way. But I will say that I think that, the rushed climax, sort of hampers not only Sam Keith's art, but it also hampers Howard Mackie's writing, because, for the most part, he does a pretty good job of, developing things, in the sense that, you're seeing, different perspectives on, Doctor Doom, Ghost Rider, and Wolverine, and some character development and what have you. But then when it gets to the climax, I mean, you just get this, info dump that, Doctor Doom had at some point had both Wolverine and Danny Ketch / Ghost Rider abducted by Doombots and, brought to Latveria to, be, hooked up to this apparatus. And it feels very rushed because, we don't really see it happening. We just hear about it, right? And it cuts to, Wolverine and Ghost Rider, breaking out of the apparatus after having woken up and, taking on some hastily drawn Doombots. And even the Doombots, it's like they're very squiggly looking, and, there's not much thought, given into making them look like an army of robots. It looks like something a little kid would draw, I hate to say. And so, as far as the writing goes, I mean, like I said, it really comes across as an info dump, and so, which is a disappointment because, Howard Mackie was actually doing a pretty good job of developing the story up to this point. But I think that maybe if, instead of just having, this issue, be like the 32-page story, which, all of the Marvel Comics Presents, comics were, I believe, with like, 4 8-page stories, in the usual format. I think that this story, would have benefited from, a few more pages. So that way both, so that way Howard Mackie, would have been able to have maybe expounded upon, what happened in the real world. Like, how did Doctor Doom, how was he able to, get both Wolverine and Danny Ketch all the way to Latveria without anyone else noticing? Like, had he attacked Wolverine, or had he had his Doombots attack Wolverine when Wolverine was, going out for a night on a town and didn't have the help of the X-Men? Or, did he abduct Danny Ketch, from his home? Or did he abduct Danny Ketch when he was just riding around on his motorcycle? I mean, it would have been interesting to see, like, if they'd been able to have a few more pages in the story, I would have liked to have seen how Doom had pulled that off, because the way the info dump is done, it just comes across like, oh crap, we're running out of space. I gotta wrap this up real quick, And I hate to say it, because Howard Mackie, at least at this point in his career, was actually a decent writer. I should say a decent to good writer for the most part. But when it comes to, say, Marvel Comics Presents especially, he tends to have a problem, I've noticed, with sticking the landing. Like, he's good at maybe setting things up, but then as the stories go on, it seems like either he doesn't quite know how to wrap things up, or he hadn't maybe come up with a concise ending, so it comes across as very rushed once it gets to the ending. And that's something that you could argue applies to some of his work outside of Marvel Comics Presents, in the sense that he's really good at setting things up, but when it comes to, say, concluding things, usually it comes across as very, I guess you could say, either rushed or convoluted. And I hate to say that, because for the most part I think he's a decent to good writer, but that is a criticism that I think has some merit, unfortunately, and that actually applies to this particular story too. So yeah, but all in all, though, I think connecting these two stories together, I'm going to go ahead and give both Hauntings in this story and the Wolverine and Ghost Rider story here, I'm going to go ahead and give them both 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, not bad stories. I mean, they're both fun, but at the same time, I think they could have been better had they had more room to play with, in terms of, say, had maybe a bigger page count and what have you. And also, if Jim Valentino hadn't been trying so hard to imitate Rob Liefeld, I think the story would have looked better. And so, just real quick, I'll show you all some of the artwork. And so you have the cover art, which I already showed you for issue 99. And I actually like this picture right here, with Nightmare on his steed in his realm. So right here, the artwork doesn't look bad, okay? But then you get to right here, though, like, you look at the face, and then you look at Wolverine's face, and you could definitely see, similarities to Rob Liefeld's art style. And so here's Nightmare appearing as Mariko. And here's the bloody panel I was talking about, where Nightmare just basically impales Wolverine, blood's just pouring out of him. And I will say that, I mean, having Professor X, be something that appears in this Nightmare, I mean, courtesy of Nightmare, I thought was interesting. But I was initially thinking that, this was the character of Shinjin, who was from the Wolverine miniseries. He was a, Japanese crime lord that Wolverine fought. And, I thought it was supposed to be Shinjin, like something that Nightmare had pulled up that was still haunting Wolverine. But then it's like, oh, that's Professor X, and so that's where I think the artwork was kind of it could have been better in terms of showing, that no, this is Professor Xavier, but this is after Wolverine's woken up, and there's Nightmare kind of watching from his realm. So I'm not going to show you like every single page in this one, though, because this is like a full-on 32-page story. I'll show you all some of it, though. So you have a really neat series of panels from in Latveria. And I like how it kind of zooms in on Dr. Doom here. And Sam Kieth, I thought, did a really good job on this. And I love this series of panels right here, where it's like a gradual close-up on Dr. Doom's eyes. And there's Nightmare. I love this picture right here. On one hand, I thought Sam Kieth did a really good job of illustrating, Nightmare's steed. But I love this, sort of surreal, blurry tree-like, figure he's made Nightmare into here. And I never thought I'd see, a picture of the Fantastic Four done by Sam Kieth here. And apparently this is something that really haunts Doom, the Fantastic Four and Reed Richards, mainly. And I like this picture right here. It's just very surreal. That's, supposed to be Doom waking up right there. You see his mask and I guess all the energy and everything just sort of, coming out at him after he was woken up. And Sam Kieth, and I thought this was a nice little gag here, because when it comes to women, Sam Kieth tends to make them, very, buxom and scantily clad. And so, well, he's got this, French maid here, or a maid in a French maid outfit, Doom's, walking along saying, that she needs to cover herself up or dress appropriately, sort of like, sort of a joke at his own work here. I mean, granted, it's hard Mackie writing the story, but I thought that was a nice, bit where Sam Kieth was kind of in on his own joke, And then you got a really badass looking picture of Ghost Rider here. And you have Danny Ketch, turning into Ghost Rider. And you see the eyeball coming out. That was pretty cool. Here we go. Now we're getting all psychedelic. So yeah, Sam Kieth's pretty good drawing Ghost Rider. Right, there we go. That's better. So up to this point, the artwork's actually been pretty good on Sam Kieth's part. And here we go. This is where Wolverine comes in on issue 100 here. And Sam Kieth, I mean, he's no stranger to drawing Wolverine, whether it be cover art or the Blood Hungry story. But I love this series of panels here. But unfortunately, it's somewhere around this point that the artwork gets a little more rushed. Like, it doesn't look bad, but you're starting to see chinks in the armor, so to speak. Like right here, this is starting to look kind of rushed. So then you get to the point where this is where you get the info dump. And so you got the info dump and the rushed artwork. So like right here, you know, this massive figures is supposed to be the army of Doombots that have abducted Wolverine and Ghost Rider. So yeah, it's like, you know, it's all squiggly looking, and yeah. But yeah, there you go though. So, you know, once again, both stories, and since they're connected to one another, 3 stars out of 5. So, thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review, and I hope you like what you see here. And if you like, yeah, let's try this again. Thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review, and if you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe, and if you got any questions, comments, feel free to drop a line, let me know. Y'all take care, have a good night, bye.